Instead of a dumpster fire this week, we did something different. We did an AMA. So in our PHETASY.com community, people submit their questions, and I answered them in video format. And we're going to break it up into different segments and just post it throughout the week. All of our subscribers will obviously be getting the full unedited version on PHETASY.com. Please sign up and join that community. Otherwise, enjoy. And thank you for watching. And Dumpster Fire will be back next week. Don't worry, for Super Tuesday.
This first question is from Scott. The top 5 people who changed your life when you really needed help and how?
I should probably have thought about these in advance.
It's good that they have to be off the cuff.
Yeah, I have no idea. It's so hard to answer that question because so much of it is retrospectively. So it's people I didn't realize were helping me at the time. For instance, Mame, our grandmother, would be a great example because she was the first person who told me that I had the gene of addiction. And I was like, yeah, whatever, grandma, whatever, Mame. And I didn't listen to her. And looking back, that was somebody who was pointing me in the right direction and trying to help me. And I didn't listen.
But that's okay. That's fine.
But
if you didn't listen
also looking back and having that knowledge, I'm able to say, oh, she recognized this thing that took me 35 years to recognize. And I trust her, so it just, when I sometimes doubt, which as an alcoholic I do in recovery, it's so crazy. You just start lying to yourself. You're like, nah, I'm 6 years sober. Like, I can try it again. And I just hear Mame saying, so she continues to help me even from beyond the grave. I hear her saying like, oh, you've got the gene, just like your grandfather. You've got to be careful. You can probably never drink. And she was right.
Yeah.
And I was on heroin at her funeral, which is one of my most shameful moments of my life. And, oh, God, I still get choked up thinking about it. Even when I was 19 in rehab processing, I got choked up about it. But she was right. And it's ironic that, like, I should have even seen it then that she was right. I think I did see it then. I just didn't
want to.
Yeah. Or I didn't know what to do about it at that point. I was so far in. Weirdly, Hugh Hefner, not that I ever met him in person, but I stumbled on and I got to tell at least his son this, Cooper, when we had lunch recently. I stumbled on it was when I didn't know what I wanted to do really. I got very lost probably around high school, and I saw some like it was a 2-part series of his biography, and it was amazing, just about his life, but mostly the thing that struck me was that this was a man that had a vision. He had a vision for his product. He had a vision for what he wanted to stand for. He had a vision. He just had such impeccable vision. And he became like my idol and my hero. And then when I started PHETASY in my 20s, which at the time felt very old, but looking back, I was very young to be trying to start a new brand with a vision. I had learned from him that it's really that, and we've talked about this just it's the why you do the why. Mm-hmm. Why am I doing this? Not so much what am I selling? I can sell widgets, but why do people want to buy my widgets? Mm-hmm. Or my Bridget in this case.
What sets your Bridgets apart?
Yeah. It's so funny because everyone used to call me Bridget the Widget, like growing up, everyone. And now I'm selling Bridget the Widgets, Bridget's Widgets.
And making tens of dollars.
Making tens of dollars. Look out. The other one that jumps to mind immediately is the women at my rehab, at the halfway house where I stayed, particularly my counselor, Kate, and the head woman, Lil. Lil sat me down when I was 19 and I'd been there for months at this point in this halfway house. And I was the only white girl. I've talked about this on other interviews and places. I was the only white girl. I was by far the youngest at the time. And I was completely kind of I was a fish out of water. It was very much like Orange is the New Black. And they said, Lil sat me down and she said, you have a gift and you're either going to have to acknowledge it and take responsibility for it, or you're going to squander it. And she said, you have a gift of, making everybody laugh in really horrible circumstances, because that was my thing. I just wanted to make everyone laugh in this halfway house where there was a lot of tragedy and a lot of tragic stories and people coming in and out. It was actually really sad all the time. And people doing well and going to jail and people relapsing, and it was just like constant revolving door of trauma and tragedy. And then the stories you hear from women generally who have been in that system. So that was one of those moments that sat with me, because no one wants to hear that they have a gift. It's not even something I can, even still saying it sounds so narcissistic and ridiculous. It's like, let me talk about how humble I am. But it did strike me that at a certain point I'd have to take responsibility for it. She just said I had this ability to kind of see through people's whatever, like their outsides, and be able to directly kind of get to right of like who they are. Mm-hmm. And maybe that was just a product of moving a lot. I wasn't too fazed by like the external conditions or skin color or wealth, or it was really always very much like, are you a dick or are you a nice person? Mm-hmm. And that was, I think that stuck with me even long after I left, was that more that we have a choice in life to use whatever gifts we have, or we can choose to squander them. And every day you're either, and some days, like, not everybody's Giselle and frickin' Tom Brady. I was talking to somebody on the phone about this today. Because, I was reading an article with her. I'm like, Jesus Christ, do they ever have a day where they're like, I just can't get out of bed? And like, no, I don't think they do.
Giselle and Tom Brady do not.
No, I think they just get up and they're like, get your shit together, you lazy. But, they might not have the same background or whatever, or something, but they, maybe they do. We just don't see it, where it's like, what's it all for? And what am I doing? I have a lot of those days. And I think that every day is a challenge to what percentage of the day am I fighting against the instinct to squander everything, and what part of the day am I using my effort to really develop what I want to bring into the world, whether that's a product or whether that's just a way of being, or whether it's just a connection to my family and friends and loved ones. That was something that struck me with Kobe was, at the end of the day, he'll be remembered. He's a huge star. The whole world knows his name. But it doesn't matter. He's going to be forgotten. The news cycle is going to move on a couple of generations. He'll be a number and a name on the wall, but it will affect his wife and kids for the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. And it made me realize, like, that is the thing, love. And he affected so many people and inspired so many people. And he did use his very short time on Earth to do more than most of us will do in 70 billion lifetimes. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, the people who are most affected by you are the ones who are in your immediate day-to-day life.
Right.
And that's why remembering, and being that we're in Lent and we're doing that, like, I tend to go very within at this time and try and shut down all the noise. It's a time for me to remember that is, like, put the priority, right size the priorities. Right. It's easy for me to get caught up in, like, all the stuff outside and the bells and baubles and whistles and all of the noise. I think Lil inspired that, like, trajectory to move through life, from the heart center, and to move with purpose. And I fail all the time. Another one would be my honors English teacher, Melody Monacan. My honors English teacher in Minnesota in 10th grade. Or was it my junior year? I can't even remember. I think it was my junior year. Or maybe it was my sophomore year, actually. I can't even remember what year it was. I think it was 10th grade. she, again, there was a lot of shit going on in my household, and she sat me down and she was very frustrated. She said at the end of one year, "You are my most frustrating student I've ever had." And she said, she was like, "You have a gift of writing. And if you actually, did something about it,
Applied
yourself, yeah, you could really do things with it." And she still reaches out to me on Facebook, and she still roots for me. I don't know that, she reached out when she saw me on Curb Your Enthusiasm. So that's kind of cool that she gets to still be around. But she definitely made me realize that I always knew I was good at school, but that being good at school doesn't mean that you're like a good writer. And writing always came easily to me, but she was the one who first sat me down and was kind of like, "You could do this for a living," like one of the few people who could actually make a living doing this if you wanted to. And I, again, didn't really, it struck me because she didn't know what was going on in my household. And years later, when she kind of found out, she's wished she had done probably more to help. But it struck me. I think it was one of those in my moments, in the moments of, I'm looking at the answer to this question, and it seems that all these people, in my moments of doubt moving forward, they're the people who I hear in my head now. Wow. So I guess when you ask me who affected me when I needed it, I've needed these words more than one time moving forward, and that's why they resonated, although at the time I didn't know it. Mm-hmm. It's like that, you can't connect the dots looking forward, the famous Steve Jobs commencement speech. Mm-hmm. It's like these are people that at the time, they just were saying things to me, and they probably had no idea that those words would echo into to me sitting in front of you right now, being alive and writing and creating. And the fifth one, it would be Maggie. It would be cousin Maggie. Oh. And you did come along when I needed you, and you also have been there along the way when I needed you, and always have those words of just keep going. We joke you're my Sam.
Sam and Frodo. Yeah.
I'm like, I definitely wouldn't be sitting here without Maggie, cousin Maggie, who has been, I think we met at a time we were both pretty lost, and I was trying to build something, and my own biggest enemy has always been trying to get out of my own way, and but still being ambitious and building things in spite of that. Mm-hmm. And it was just like you always have the right thing to say. You've always been able to. Even today, I was like, I don't want to get out of bed. And you came over and we went for a walk. And now here we are doing this. Something. I think it's good to have it's so important to have that buddy system in life.
Totally.
I mean, there's so many more people, I'm sure. But those are the 5 that are right here when you ask me that on the spot are coming.
Yeah.
Coming to.
It's true. Well, we were saying the other day, because I didn't talk to you, I think, Monday. And then we talked on Tuesday, and we were both in a dark place. I was like, I knew I needed to call you, because I know if I let 2 days go by without talking to you, I'm in a bad place.
I know. Usually if I don't hear from you, I was like, from Sunday to Tuesday, I was like, uh-oh. Maggie's isolating.
But if I start to, but it's like, I can't let more than one full day go by.
That was why I got a roommate too, because I have such a tendency to isolate. And if I didn't have somebody who was coming in and out of my life, I would stay in bed for 3 days. And you wouldn't even know it, because I can do my job from my bed.
Right.
So it would seem like I'm being a very productive member of society. But actually, I'm just a piece of shit, naked in bed, doing nothing.
Well, that was a great question. So thank you, Scott.
That was a really good question.
Eric, what can the PHETASY community do to promote what's going on here and grow the fam? It's what we want to do, and get your rock stars on payroll.
I think the best thing everyone can do is tell their close friends about us. If something, it's like word of mouth. Nothing's more powerful than word of mouth. And so if you are into what we're doing, tell your friends about Dumpster Fire. Tell them about the community at PhetaSy, which is amazing and supportive. And people are like opening their souls and hearts up. And it's just so wonderful to see. And everyone's supporting each other. And I'll be having a bad day. And then I'll go every time I'll be kind of in a hole, or lately it's just been a little weird. And I'll go into PhetaSy, and everybody's like so supportive of each other, even if they're struggling, and they're so honest about their struggles. Everyone's being so vulnerable in there. And that just inspires me to keep going. And it inspires me to keep building what we're building. And I know that, Dumpster Fire's feisty. This is you're seeing the other kind of more walk-ins welcomey side of me on these questions. And Maggie and I, for those of you who don't know, do a check-in every single Dumpster Fire at the end.
Every
which
walk-ins welcome.
Every walk-ins welcome, at the end, where we just talk about where we're at in that moment and that day. And it usually ends up with us talking about the apocalypse.
Because that's where our brains always are.
And so this is a little bit more like that. And we'll probably be doing more of this kind of stuff too, because I really am interested in all the emails people are writing to me about being politically homeless and their feelings about that. Because I think that I'm more interested in like where you're struggling and suffering and how to root through some of that self-doubt and overcome those. I just do think, we're not all paragons of discipline like Giselle and Tom Brady. So how do you get out of your own way?
Right.
It's really that fight against yourself is the fight that interests me the most. Not really the fight out there in the culture wars, because generally I find that I'm just projecting stuff into the world. But yeah, so the best way you can help us build the community is by tell one person about us that you think would get us.
That you think would like it.
Yeah.
Just
that's really the best way, I think. I trust my friends when they give me recommendations, especially if they're those friends that are like the mavens, the ones who are kind of on the cusp of the things, the cool things.
Let's see.
This is fun.
This is a good one. Chuck, if you could ask yourself one question, what would it be?
What's it all for? My question that I ask myself every day, all day, is what's it all for? I guess if I could ask myself one question, my question is, do I know the answer?
To what's it all for, or
do I know the answer to the question?
Okay. The question you would ask yourself, like, it's an interesting question. It's like if an interviewer were to ask you a question, what would the one question you'd want to hear be?
Yeah.
Or is it just like, what is the question that you constantly ask yourself all day long and don't have an answer for?
Yeah, I think my question is, what's the question to ask anyone that gets to the heart of things quickly?
Why are you here?
Why are you here? Bridget has an existential crisis. I'm like, I don't know.
On YouTube.
I don't know. On YouTube. I don't know what I'm doing, guys. I'm lost.
What's it all for?
I have been feeling lost and insecure and wondering what it's all for, though. So I guess if I could ask myself one question right now, I mean, you and I were having this conversation on our walk. It's all about the questions.
Yep.
It's all about a good therapist will ask the right questions.
Sometimes it's asking just the one right question, and as long as you're willing to be honest with yourself, then you can find the answer. But you have to be willing to go deep and be honest with yourself.
What's the one question you would ask me, Maggie?
Ooh, God. What is the one question I want to ask you? I feel like when I come up with a question for you, I always ask it.
Yeah.
It's
You have the luxury of being like, do you know where those files are?
It's not like there's some deeply buried. Okay, what do you want when you're 90 years old on your deathbed looking back at
oof.
whatever. When you're on your deathbed looking back at your life, what is something that you might regret that you'd want to maybe look at? Like, what would your biggest regret be?
In my personal life, probably kids is one that I'm worrying about, especially as that door is closing. Would I wish that I had a child? Because I never really felt like having a kid for the sake of having a kid. Although now that I'm approaching that time, I'm like, should I have a kid just for the sake of having a kid? Because I always wanted a family.
Right.
I didn't want just a kid.
Right.
So there's that. Or who knows? Maybe it'll be like a apocalyptic wasteland, and I'll be like, thank God I didn't have kids. We don't know.
Right.
There's that that's one that I'm curious about, or I guess that if I could project into the future looking back. The other one is with stand-up, because I naturally love it. It comes very naturally to me, and I love the medium, as terrifying as it is. But I don't really like the culture around it, and I don't like late nights because I like being up early in the morning, and I don't like driving around LA trying to get 3 minutes of stage time. So those are those harder questions as someone who's doing freelance. And I mean, talk about an endeavor that you need to have money to do. I was doing a lot more stand-up when I was waitressing because I had more money, and at the time I wasn't getting paid to write, so my time was not directly connected to my money. Now that's not the case.
Right.
It's a good thing because it means that I'm making money doing other things that I love, but it also means that thing that I love is now in the cost-benefit analysis. It's harder for me to justify that time.
Right.
And I'll have people who are like famous comedians. They're like, if I can find the time, Bridget, you can. I'm like, you're rich.
Right.
You're fucking rich.
You make your
famous.
money doing stand-up.
You make your money on television
Right,
shows.
right.
Like, you are a rich person telling me that I can find the time. And it's just, maybe it's one of those things that I will have to just get over a hump financially before I can pivot back to really devoting myself to it, because I do worry that I'll look back and be like, I could have been so freaking good at that, and I just was afraid and made excuses and didn't have enough. It's again one of those things, you just have to kind of love the culture, and it might be something that I just have to accept.
Right.
I love the camaraderie among comedians, but God, comics are just fucked up, man. I love them, but it's just like, I don't necessarily want to be around a bunch of dysfunctional people all the time. And you kind of have to love that when you're in comedy. And I like being at home. So that's something I wrestle with too.
We've got a question from Frank. What made you get hope? What does she mean to you?
Hope was an act of God and proof that God exists.
Yep.
Hope springs eternal. She's being so good right now. For once, it's like she knows we're not being feisty. She can sense that the feist is not here.
Feral PHETASY is not in the room.
So Maggie and I lived in the same building for a while, and ownership changed hands, and then there was a dog one day in the courtyard, and I was like, we can have dogs now? I might get a dog. And this was right after a couple of people in my life had lost dogs, and although it sounds really weird, it kind of made me realize maybe I needed a dog. I think I was like a year and a half sober.
Yeah, you came running up to my apartment with, did you know we can have dogs now? I think I want to get a dog.
And I said I wanted a boxer.
And I was like, what kind of dog would you get? And you were like, I don't know, maybe a boxer.
Knowing nothing about boxers. I didn't grow up with boxers. I knew nothing. I just thought they looked funny and like fun. Every time I saw them, they just looked like they had a lot of energy, and they were really like bounding around and hilarious.
And then literally 2 days later, this guy at my work came back to work and was like, I found this kind of puppy wandering around. She was like 6 months old, covered with ticks and tar, and like obviously, had been on the streets for a little while.
She was like 32 pounds.
And he was like, I think she's a boxer. And he took her home that night and cleaned her up and brought her back. But I called Bridget when he was like, well, I need to find a home for her. And I called Bridget. I was like, a boxer just appeared off the street.
And I was like, God damn it. You can't. Yeah, this boxer appeared off the streets and out where Maggie works. She calls me, tells me that it's there. And I'm like, well, I can't ask the universe for something and get it 2 days later and be like, actually, I'm not ready. So I had to get ready and basically had one night to think about it. And I just kind of said yes. I was like, I asked for this and here it is. And then she appeared and the next day I had her and I had no idea what I had got myself into.
Yeah.
When she first was on a leash and I would be trying to walk her, I was like, she would spin and spin and spin in circles. And suddenly I realized what a huge responsibility and just how much it limited my own. I mean, I was the girl that was like, hey, you want to go to Burning Man? And I could be ready in like 2 days to go to Burning Man. And suddenly I would look at her and be like, you're not the only one who's not comfortable on your leash, Missy. And I had to send her away to get trained because she was just I'm not a dog whisperer. Things I'm not gifted at, dog whispering.
We tried training her, but then your trainer was like, boxers are really hard to train. They're puppies for life.
They're puppies for life and they're insanely stubborn. And she still is.
Yep.
She still does whatever here she comes with her ball. Hope.
And then, but you've said before, it took you like 2 years to really bond with her.
Well, it took me 2 years to bond with her because of a couple reasons. One, I have intimacy issues.
Right.
And two, I wasn't sure that I would be able to keep her. I was like, And three, I grew up in a dysfunctional household where we were constantly getting dogs and giving them back. And so I psychologically, I just could not let myself get attached to her. And I also couldn't even commit to her psychologically. Mm-hmm. So it did take me, my therapist always laughs. She's like, it took you 2 years to bond with your dog. Like, cut yourself some slack when I'm like trying to bond with humans. And now.
And what does she mean to you now?
Now she is. It's funny too, because she forced even a small modicum of routine in my life.
Yep.
And I started getting paid to write. I'm sure it was also just a random coincidence, but I actually do think it was her forcing me to stay in one place and not run here, there, and everywhere. And having that routine forced my life into a little bit of a routine. And I was in the darkest place when Hope came into my life. Mm-hmm. I mean, the darkest. The reason her name is Hope, aside from it being like the most corny, cheesy dog name, and people are always like, oh, what did she save your life? Yeah, she did. She did save my life. I was like suicidally depressed. And so a year and a half into sobriety was the hardest. I wasn't really working a great program. After the year of sobriety, I was kind of like, is this it? Like, okay. I hit this kind of wall and I was still waiting tables and I didn't know what I was doing. And I felt just, and all this shit. They say that when you get sober, it's like slamming, like you've been driving at 100 miles an hour, just throwing like garbage in the backseat of your car. And then you get sober and slam on the brakes and like all the garbage comes forward.
Wow.
And that's a perfect idea of what it is. That was my experience. And right around a year and a half, that stuff started really coming up. And it was just a lot of stuff to process and shame and worthlessness. And I felt like such a loser, just such a loser. And Hope came along and forced me to go walk every day and forced me to focus on something other than myself and forced me to take care of something, and she did, and now she's Hopey Dopey.
She's like the love of your life.
Yeah, she's just the cutest little face ever. And there are days where I'm like, God, you're just such there are days when she wants to walk. I'm like, every day with this? Really?
Oh yeah, she's such a little dirtbag sometimes,
she wants to
but
play
she's still freaking adorable.
Yeah, and now she's my everything. She's taught me a lot about love and life, and People always say we don't deserve dogs, and I don't think we do. But she's a little chubby fatso now. I want to do a whole video of Hope where it's just started from the bottom, now we're here, and it's her just snoring on a couch in the meat sweats after she ate some filet
with her like heated blanket that she sleeps on, and it's literally like she gets so spoiled, and it's literally like, Hope, you survived on the streets. What are you doing?
She's so spoiled. She sleeps on she like commandeered my heated blanket. And so finally I just put it on her bed, and now she sleeps on her bed every night. And so at least she's not on my bed. God. But she's just such a little like bully. I swear she has bulldog.
Every time we're editing a dumpster fire, the final edit, it's the three of us. Sam's in the middle because she's doing the final edit, and Bridget and I are on either side of her. And we have to be close because we all have to look at the computer. And Hope tries to bully her way between Bridget and Sam every single time, and then she'll like go around to the side, and then if Bridget moves, she'll like lie down behind her and just kind of sneak in
slowly. I'll be sitting on the floor.
It's like, Hope, you're such a bully.
And I wouldn't let her get away with it, but it cracks me up too much because she's so much like me. Like she and I do.
She finds a way, man.
Yeah, she's just stubborn. She's very crafty, that one. Thanks for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully now you're going to get to know the person behind the person in Dumpster Fire, and you'll get to know me a little bit more. I love your questions. Please send them to weeklydumpsterfire@gmail.com. We give precedence to the people in the PHETASY community. So if you want one of your questions truly answered, join us in PHETASY.com. It's a great community. We're very supportive. There's a kind of ongoing conversation talking about all this deep stuff that we're covering and not so deep. Touch my bells and buttons. Don't forget to touch my bells and buttons. And tell your friends. And I'm Bridget PHETASY. Now go connect to somebody.